Hi, everybody. It's April Perry and Jonathan Baylor back with another episode of the SANE show. Yay! Cheers!
Ba-ba-bum.
So excited. Are you ready for a mailbag today, Jonathan?
Mailbag. I'm always ready for a good mailbag.
Okay, so this is what's been happening. I've actually been screenshotting on my phone because this is what I do. I kind of multitask, like while I blow dry my hair, I plan the SANE show. And I just start Googling things like what, because I want to know what people out there are Googling and who want to lose weight, right? Like, okay, if I were to go to the Google for advice, what would I get? And typically what I get is so far distant from what you would share that then I want to bring it to you so that you can give us some clarity. That sound good?
It sounds almost as good as the fact that you said, then I go to the Google.
The Google.
The Google. I love it. Is it the Google? What does the Google have to say?
That's what we call it in our family. Okay, so first of all, let's just talk about grams of carbs. Now, I know we talked about like macros last time, which I still don't get all the stuff that's going on. I understand a little bit, but
Good, because you don't need to. That's the key distinction.
right. The key is like I'm already really happy with all my spinach smoothies and everything, so I feel like I'm good. But okay, so here's what I found. They were talking about this. Actually, I found this website that was pretty good, like almost in line with SANE. You're saying it's not necessary to count calories as long as you keep carbs very low and stick to protein, fat, and low carb vegetables. So like, okay, like that makes sense, right? Like that's pretty much what we do with SANE. But then they said, however, if you really want to count, they show you how you can find a calculator. But then they said the main goal is to keep carbs under 20 to 50 grams per day and then get the rest of your calories from protein and fat. So the first thing I thought of though, when I said keep carbs under 20 to 50 grams per day, I'm thinking, okay, so I should limit my vegetable intake because, you know, what if I'm eating too many carbs in my vegetables? But Jonathan says to eat like as many vegetables as you want. And so how can you help me understand this better when it comes to actually choosing what I'm going to eat each day?
That website was advocating what's called a ketogenic diet, because when you said counting carbs, any like below 20 is the Atkins induction phase. So even in the Atkins program, there are 3 stages, and only in the very first stage are you looking to stay under 20 grams of carbs. In their final stage, their long-term stage, it's much more in the 50 range. And usually SANE out of the box, like if you just do SANE as generally prescribed, you're usually going to be in about 75 grams of carb range accidentally with no carb counting involved. And there are lower carb ways of going SANE and higher carb ways of going SANE. But for what it's worth, that website was advocating a ketogenic diet, and you can do ketogenic SANE, but SANE is not ketogenic out of the box.
Okay, so is there any reason why you think I, like me, April, should limit or should go more towards a ketogenic SANE than just a SANE out of the box? Like what would be the benefits I would see if I did that?
The only reason anyone, including you, would want to go ketogenic SANE is if, one, you've yo-yo dieted a phenomenal number of times, you're diabetic or pre-diabetic, and you're not seeing the results you want from a non-ketogenic SANE lifestyle. A ketogenic SANE lifestyle is going to be much more restrictive and much more extreme. It's probably not something you'd also keep up for the long term, but for some people who are extremely insulin resistant, they need that as a therapeutic stopgap. It's a little bit like, you know, if you break a bone, you need to immobilize it, not for the rest of your life, but just for a while so that it can heal. So if your insulin system and if your hormonal system is really damaged, you might need to go ketogenic SANE for a couple months, and then you could taper up your carb count.
Okay, so then what does that look like as far as counting your carbs? I mean, is that all I would need to do is just look at my portions and see how many grams of carbs there are and just count those?
I don't think you would. I mean, if you want to go ketogenic, yes, you do need to count carbs.
Yeah, but let's say it wasn't me necessarily, but let's say it's someone who's like, yeah, I've been trying, it's not working, I'm really struggling. I would like to try what Jonathan just talked about. Do I need to do anything with my protein or whole food fats differently? What would that look like just from a high level?
The vegetable thing. So the first thing is you really would need to limit to the 4 food groups, the 3 food groups we talked about, which is vegetables, proteins, and whole food fats. Oils would be a little bit more permitted than they generally are, because you would be super 0 fruit, 0 legumes, 0 sugar, 0 starch, period. Because one slice of bread destroys the ketogenic experience. So
Okay.
it's way stricter from that perspective.
Okay.
So then you would dial up your fat intake a little bit more because you're getting no carbs. And then from a vegetable perspective, you would focus much more on leafy greens to the exclusion of things like carrots, because carrots do have a much higher carb count than leafy greens.
Okay. All right. So good to know. And if people wanted to really dive deeper into that with you, if they're part of SANE Ignite and they have questions in the support group or the Q&As, then they could get more from you on that.
That's exactly right. We have live group coaching calls. We also have one-on-one calls with SANE certified coaches, as well as in our support group. We do personalized meal planning and things like that.
Okay. Because I'm not like gearing towards that right now. I was just wondering as I was reading that, I thought, oh, well, maybe I'm eating too many carbs from vegetables. I just didn't know. Okay. Now, one other question. This is in addition to the other three I had for you, but why is it when people are suggesting fat sources, it never includes whole food fats? Literally, it's like olive oil, coconut oil. It's all oils or butter. Why does nobody talk about like coconut or olives? Is this weird to anyone?
It is weird. And, I never actually thought about it until just now, but here's why. I think most people, when they think of nuts, which are the canonical example of whole food fats or seeds, people think those are proteins.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. They say, I need a high protein snack, so I'm going to eat some nuts. So they say that, well, unless it's oil, I mean, even an egg is 64% fat. But if you ask someone what's a great high protein breakfast, they say eggs. So I just think there's a misunderstanding of what a fat is. And a fat is just a food that gets more of its calories from fat than anything else. So yes, oil is 100% fat. But nuts and seeds, the things that the oil is derived from, is also a fat, but it's a whole food fat, and it's even better for you.
I think people just don't know. I really think they just don't know. Okay, so now Jonathan just told you. So there you go. Okay, now a question. All right, this I've got to share. So first of all, I've been doing so well. Like after I got over this whole concussion thing, and about 3 weeks ago, I was talking to Aaliyah. I was like, Aaliyah, I've been laying in bed for like months, it feels like. And I wasn't moving my body a lot because I was getting headaches all the time. Like it was bad. And I bruised my tailbone. Like I was such a mess a couple months ago. It was not funny. And I'm feeling super grateful for my life right now. But I've gotten so much better. So I actually put on my calendar, I'm doing yoga 2 days a week. I'm walking my dog. Well, I have it on my calendar 1 day a week, but I'm doing more walking than that. I'm at the gym. I have it on my calendar 2 days a week. Like I'm protecting my time. So I've been moving my body more, blending my green smoothies. Eric and I went to a conference though. So I was out of town. It was like 3 days at a conference. And I was so like worried that I was going to get stuck in like some insane environment. So I packed a cooler that, I'm not kidding, is like huge, this huge cooler. And the morning before we're leaving, I blended 3 days worth of green smoothies. I had my little cottage cheese containers full of green smoothies. I mean, Eric thought the cooler smelled awful. I called the hotel 3 different times. Are you sure you have a fridge? Are you sure you have a fridge? Like, cause I'm coming, I'm ready, and I took open tuna cans and I just had everything. Like, so I was so ready to go, which was great. Okay. But then something happened. I need to tell you, because I was like, Jonathan would have figured this out. And I had a hard time. So, okay. why are you laughing? Laughing.
We just got to get you one of those bracelets, the WWJD, except it's what would Jonathan do?
I know, help me. Okay, so here's what happened. We had a great day Friday. So we're like in meetings. I mean, it was like a heavy, intense conference. It wasn't like the kind you're kind of in the back, like dozing. Like it was intense where my kids are texting me. I'm like texting them back while I'm having the conversation because I just couldn't even stop the conversations. So brain was fully engaged for 3 days. And Eric's an extrovert, so we just like talk all the time. I kind of had to like go into therapy when I got back to like breathe because I was so anyway. Okay, so the last night though, I've got all my SANE food back in the hotel. And the last night they do this last minute, hey, this guest speaker just came in. It's going to be awesome. Go ahead and stay if you want to be part of it. And we're all ordering pizzas. So I'm sitting there. I'm like, if I left right now, I'm going to miss this opportunity. There's no restaurants around here. What am I going to do? And so they brought in they had a gluten-free pizza, they had a vegan pizza, and then they had all the regular pizzas. So I tried like a gluten-free slice and some vegan pizza, but I was like, darn it. What would you have done? Because I was so hungry at that point, but I was so engaged. And I get, it's like you have to figure out your priority, but what would you have done during that situation? Because I didn't want to be hungry the whole night, but the food they'd ordered, I was like, I just don't eat this. Okay. I'll stop whining now, but tell me, like, what would you have done?
This is a great example of a question that is actually fairly frequent, just to distill it down,
Okay.
which is it better to eat insanely or not eat, if those are your two choices?
Okay,
Is
so
that correct?
I could have been more succinct. That's what I thought you might want to know my whole story. Okay. All right.
Okay. So the answer to that question is, and this might shock you, but it's actually, I would argue it's better to not eat, because there are metabolic benefits to what's called intermittent fasting, but I do not think most people should intentionally intermittent fast, because life will give you opportunities to accidentally intermittent fast.
Okay.
So there are, and this gets back to our previous episode, we talked about a compelling why. If the why is just like, oh, I can't eat, I'm starving myself, I'm so hungry. Or if you're like, look, I'm gonna, hey, I heard about that intermittent fasting thing, and I don't want to intentionally ever starve myself, but you know what? I'm not going to eat for the next 8 hours, and it's just really going to simplify my life. And there's going to be a little bit of discomfort and stomach pains, but actually I know that I'm experiencing some cell recycling and some of the positive metabolic benefits of intermittent fasting, and I'm not teaching myself to fear food. Because in fact, I'm saying I love food, and I'm not going to put this toxic food in my body. So that's personally, I'm not a big fan of intermittent fasting, because I think you'll do it accidentally based on the situations life puts you in.
Okay, so I love that. Now tell me more about the benefits of intermittent fasting, just like the higher level, because here's the thing, like I fast for religious purposes once a month, where I do a 24-hour fast. And I'm totally fine with that, because it's for a spiritual reason, and we take the money we would have spent on food and we donate that to those who are poor and who are hungry. So like that, I'm like, oh, I'm feeding the poor and I'm having a spiritual time. Like, this is important to me. But tell me, I don't know any of the physical benefits of fasting. So can you tell me about that?
Yeah, from a very high level, it is a little bit, it's just like giving your digestive system a break, for lack of better terms. So that digesting food is a metabolically costly process. It's a little bit like if you just constantly drive your car and you kind of give it a break. So it's not, to be very clear, a car was intended to be driven. There's nothing wrong with driving a car. You don't need to intentionally not drive your car. I've never fasted, and I kind of don't ever plan on doing it. But there are metabolic benefits. Your digestive system resets a bit. There are things that's called autophagy, where some of the weaker cells in your body does start to cannibalize itself, which sounds terrible. And this is why tread with caution, but your body will attack the weakest cells first. So it's a little bit like a brush fire in a forest, where the detritus, or the kind of dead ground cover, will get burnt off first. And then if it's just an intermittent fast, it's not going to start cannibalizing the big, beautiful trees, just that negative stuff at the bottom.
Okay. All right. That's actually super helpful. Okay. Back now to the website that was kind of sane that I found. Okay. Here's what they said. And I kind of already know what you're going to say here, but I want to give you the opportunity. It says you can take 1 day off, and that's like in quotes, 1 day off per week. And I know how you feel about like taking it off, right? Being sane. They say many people prefer Saturdays, and they say, on your day off, eat where you're going to eat carbs, basically what they're calling it. They say you can have healthier carbs like oats, rice, quinoa, potatoes, sweet potatoes, things like that. But they say, but only this one high carb day. Otherwise, if you do it more often, it won't work. But here's what's interesting. They call it a refeed day, like where you're refeeding your body carbs. And they said these cheat meals or carb refeeds, which I'd never even heard that term before, and said aren't necessary, but they can upregulate some fat burning hormones like leptin and thyroid hormones. And I'm like, I have no idea what that means. So
this is one of the key reasons I encourage people to not just read random stuff on the internet. So we have the SANE Ignite program for a reason. It has literally millions of, the number one complaint we get about it is that it has too much in it. So if that's the worst thing you got going for you, that it's too comprehensive, that's not too bad. So we want to provide a one-stop shop for you, because you get these mixed messages. So here's what's going on. There's many different concepts being conflated together. So the first is, if you go on an extremely low carb ketogenic diet, first of all, there has been no long-term studies on what happens to a human being if they eat sub 20 grams of carbs for 60 years, period. There's no culture in the history of humanity that has intentionally been vegan. There is no traditional culture that is vegan. And in fact, if you're vegan without supplementation, your spine will deteriorate because you'll never eat vitamin B12. So there are these sort of different forms of dieting that have never been scientifically proven over a long period of time, or even anecdotally proven in any cultural context. So even people who advocate very low carb ketogenic diets will often say, for things like thyroid health and so on and so forth, and sex hormone health, you should have a higher carb day on occasion. Now, that is a very different thing than a cheat day, because what this high carb day, they're not saying eat ice cream and donuts and candy bars, which is what a cheat day is. And we all know what I think about cheat days. This is more of a, if you really limit your carbs, there are, and to be clear, that's not saying out of the box, but if you do go ketogenic, there can be benefits, metabolic benefits, to taking a break from that on occasion. And I would certainly agree with that, without question, that if you're that ketogenic, you do need to give your body a break every once in a while.
Okay. All right. That was helpful, because I didn't understand how.
But I want to be really clear that when I say give your body a break, I'm saying if you're a ketogenic dieter, eating 2 sweet potatoes on Saturday, that's one thing. If you were just going sane and saying, I'm going to take a break from respecting my body and trash it with a bunch of nonsense, I am not endorsing that.
I'm very glad that you clarified that, Jonathan. So nobody trash your body. Jonathan did not say yes. Okay, now I'm going to give you, sorry, I'm in kind of a silly mood today. Okay.
It's all those spinach smoothies.
No, tell me about it. Okay, so now I need some help just understanding a little bit about how SANE actually affects your health. And here's what I've been reading about. I see a lot of terms like, okay, blood sugar, triglycerides, small dense LDL, HDL, and blood pressure. This is not part of my normal vocabulary. I never talk about LDL or HDL, triglycerides. If you ask me to define them, I'm like, I don't know, we covered them in science back in 8th grade. I don't know, like I don't talk about them. So can you just kind of walk through just the basic, like if we're talking about optimal health and there's all this stuff going on inside our body, can you just help understand, and I don't know if you want to go through each one, but just blood sugar, triglycerides, LDL and HDL, and blood pressure. How does SANE interact with any of this, or how does it benefit us to care about these things?
It doesn't benefit you to care about those things. And that's why SANE is so important, because let me take a step back, right? Even you said small, dense LDL. Even the concept of small, dense LDL didn't even exist in the medical community until recently. And you know what? 10 years from now, that list is going to sound totally different, because we're going to add 7 new things to it. And 10 years after that, we're going to add 25 new things to it, because science is continuously refining its knowledge of the human body. But you know what's amazing, April? Before we even knew what a calorie was, forget about all that other nonsense, we had radically better health and radically lower rates of obesity, because we focused on eating non-starchy vegetables, nutrient-dense protein, whole food fats, and low-sugar fruits. So instead of worrying about the definition of various scientific terms and where those numbers are at, I would argue eat lots of vegetables, nutrient-dense protein, whole food fats, and let your body take care of that stuff as it is designed to, and as it has done for the entirety of human history up until we started eating non-food.
Okay, and here's what's so interesting is I'm having a flashback to a conversation we had about electrolytes a while ago, where, people in different articles or people who are trying to sell something with weight loss, they'll often throw out scientific terms that the majority of the people really aren't familiar with, in a way to make it sound like, hey, you really need this. What about your electrolytes? What about your LDL? I mean, if I'm not aware of that, or if I don't really understand the territory, then I might go buy something that's going to help me that's different than SANE. I feel it's almost like I was talking to someone this morning, and we were talking about Facebook advertising and just marketing in general for our business. And they're like, do you have this and this and this? And they start mentioning all these things I'd never heard of. Like, well, you got to hire a company, because we're going to help put all this stuff in place. And, maybe they're right, but I feel like when someone throws out terminology that you're not familiar with, it can sometimes derail you or confuse you and cause you to think that you don't have the information that you need.
That's exactly right. And it can limit your focus in a way that's counterproductive. Let me give you one heartbreaking example that we're seeing all across the country right now. So cholesterol is meaningful. It is a thing. HDL, LDL cholesterol, super cool. But you know what? you can lower your cholesterol in ways that break your brain. They're called statins. And I'm not saying that everyone should go off statins. I'm not saying that statins are the devil, but I am saying that statins will lower your cholesterol and increase your risk of Alzheimer's disease. So the point is if you're just like, lower cholesterol, what can I do to lower my cholesterol? We can lower your cholesterol, but what are we doing to everything else in your body? So that's why focusing on those that one measure, you can make that one measurement happy while destroying everything else in your body. So that's another big risk.
Okay. How come when I hear you talk, I just want to go eat a lot of vegetables? I don't know what it is. Okay. So what's your next action? What would you say is and we've kind of covered a lot of stuff in this mailbag today, but for someone who's listening, who's like, okay, we've talked a little bit about carbs and how many carbs we need. We talked about intermittent fasting and benefits of that. We've talked about how we don't need a refeed day unless we're actually going ketogenic and we're really limiting carbs. And we've kind of walked through explaining you don't need to know all of the details of how the body works if you just know how to eat the foods that are best for you. So I think we've covered a lot of really good things today. What would you say is a good next action besides go eat a lot of vegetables?
Honestly, April, that's the next action, because the answer to, the answer to so many health concerns is literally just eat more vegetables. And it's the one thing that we don't do. It's the one thing no one posts about on Facebook. There's no memes about eating vegetables. There's no magazine articles about how to eat vegetables. So prove Kermit wrong. That's your next action. Prove Kermit the Frog wrong and show how easy it is to be green when it comes to eating green leafy veggies.
Okay, love it. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the SANE show. I always love being able to get re-encouraged and reinvigorated by Jonathan and the amazing information that he has at SANESolution. So have a wonderful day. Eat those vegetables and remember to stay sane.